Welcome back to another episode of For the Love of Lore. I am Austin, your co-host for today's adventure.
And I'm Abby. We are so glad you're here.
Today in Middle-earth, we will learn about the fate of Feanor and the First Great War of Middle-earth.
And over in Westeros, we are sailing over to the Iron Islands to hear all about the drowned god and House Greyjoy.
So, grab a flagon of ale and let's go on an adventure! Welcome back, everybody. We are officially back to the pod.
We are. It's been a minute.
It's been a hot minute.
It has.
So we are going to do a little catch up with our host today because it's been so long, and I know you guys just care so much about us. So what you been up to, Sis?
I've been working on a lot. It's almost, well, actually, officially today, it is spring break.
Thank
so
God.
Indeed, I'm going on vacation tomorrow for 4 days, and that cannot come soon enough.
I was going to say, I think we all need a little vacay.
Yeah. Yep.
Some ocean breeze, if you will.
Yeah, like warm weather, consistently warm weather. Not like one day and then the next day there's a tornado and then the day after that there's snow, because that happened.
That did happen. It was a tumultuous weekend.
Yeah.
We all need a little bit of, as Alicia Swanson says, we need a little intercoastal in our lives.
God. Yep.
We love the intercoastal, right?
It's a drinking game now. She says it so many times that every time she says it, you take a shot.
And you will be feeling good by the end. I can tell you that. I've been kind of the same. I mean, you know, again, still working the landscaping manager job. Spring's kicking off, so we're really full bore now.
Full bore.
Full bore. Besides the crazy weather days, but I mean, we are now almost done with March.
Yeah.
And we got a month and a half, and then the lovely Bryn Doyle will be moving to Peoria. I'm excited about that.
Yes. Shouts out.
BD. So that's really it. Just busier, a little more stressed, a little less hair.
You know.
Another day in the office.
Aren't you getting an apartment or something?
Yeah, we're getting a little apartment. Well, I'm actually, real life update, I'm looking at that house that's right over there.
Oh,
yeah.
hot ticket. Oh, shoot. Sorry.
That's
hot
the
ticket.
real dream, because if we get a little smooshy, it'd be nice to have like a yard for it.
Yeah.
So instead of like an apartment where it's just subjected to a balcony.
Right.
So
Speaking of houses, this one.
Oh, no.
It's been real expensive lately, friends.
It has. She's falling apart.
She got new floors, which I thought was great.
And they look great.
And then as soon as they were installing the floors, and on the last day of install, I got home from work and the flooring guys were like, well, here's your beautiful new floors. And I was like, great. And they were like, also your ceiling is leaking from your roof. And I was like, oh Lord, I have to pay for a new roof now.
Oh, it's one thing after another every time.
Happened. Yep.
Oh, well, thankfully I will be renting a house, so hopefully I won't have to re-roof.
No.
It does not sound exciting.
That would be the landlord.
Yes, that's a them issue. Because the new roof doesn't sound very fun.
No.
I can't imagine it is.
It's not on fire.
That's good. At least the house isn't on fire.
No.
But our collective bank accounts are on fire.
Yep.
But alas, we carry on. The good news is, in the world of Middle-earth, there are no bank accounts.
Okay. Hot diggity. Snaps.
Not yet, at least.
Okay.
So I know it's been a while. So before I really dive in here, I should probably give a little quick recount of what's happened. And I will throughout this little discussion I have here. But we are back in Middle-earth. Melkor done messed everything up in Valinor, killing the trees, and now there's no light. And now we're having to create a sun and a moon, but the sun and the moon are people, and this I think it's the moon is endlessly chasing the sun in kind of a creepy manner.
Yep.
Feanor burned all the ships, and now Fingolfin has to take the long way round
with Galadriel
through the icy hell, and it's just it's a mess.
But then the other ones are just hanging out.
Yes, and we will talk about them. The Sindarian elves are just chilling right now. They're protected by their little magic, so no one can find them. I would rather be them right now.
Okay.
So we are on chapter 13, and it's called The Return of the Noldor. And ChatGPT's title for this is called War, Vengeance, and the First Siege of Angband.
All right.
So yes, everyone's favorite segment is returning. The dramatic, Austin reads ChatGPT's dramatic podcast intro.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
I have to lock myself in. It's been a while.
Turn the voice on.
They swore an oath that could not be broken. They spilled the first blood of their kin in pursuit.
Oh, I said pursuit.
Person.
Oh, man. Let me redo that
All right,
sentence.
just that one.
They spilled the first blood of their kin in pursuit of stolen jewels. They crossed an ocean of ice and fire, defying both gods and doom. And now, at long last, the Noldor have returned to Middle-earth. But vengeance is never simple. Morgoth still reigns from his iron fortress. The elves of Beleriand stand wary of these exiles from the west, and even among the Noldor themselves, pride and old betrayals threaten to turn brother against brother. The war for the Silmarils has just begun.
Dun dun dun.
I mean, AI does a good job.
So I mean,
I couldn't do that. I mean, I probably could if I really sat
probably
down and...
but they don't be putting spaces after their periods.
No, I know. That's the only... I probably should have fixed that. But when you copy and paste from ChatGPT, they don't do any spacing, so it just looks like a clump. It's really nice. Not. There's a little software update for you, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
You should fix that. Anyways, yeah, we're full into the chaos now. You know, the time of peace and tranquility is over, and we are now beginning events that will carry on throughout all of Middle-earth through all the ages. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here
Let's
we
hear
go.
about it.
So this chapter is really the turning point in the history of Middle-earth. The freshly exiled Noldor elves are now kind of the dominant force in Beleriand. So in this chapter, towards the start, we kind of get, the first contact with the elves of Beleriand. Some are friendly, some are not so friendly. So like the gray elves who are there, they kind of reside in the mountains. They're pretty chill. They're just like, oh, what up, Feanor? Why are you back? What are you doing here, silly goose? And they kind of bring them in with open arms. But Thingol, again, who will be a very pivotal character going forward, and the Sindarian elves are a little more wary of why the Noldor elves are back. And there's been, I don't know if you remember last time we talked about how some of the Valar are sending messages to the Sindarians through the sea and through the rivers. Some of those messages have got to them about what really went down with the Sindarian elves, so that's why Thingol's a little more like, I don't know about this guy, this Feanor guy. He's a little much for me. So they kind of keep hiding.
He's a little sus.
Yeah, he's a little sus. They don't like that. So they keep on hiding. They really don't get too involved to start with Feanor and his Noldorian elves. And then in this chapter we get a very dramatic rescue mission, which is always cool. A prince is saved in a very unlikely way. And we get the first great siege of Middle-earth. That is at Morgoth's fortress of Angband. And that Angband name will come up. It's a fortress that will hold for a long time.
Do we get a description of this fortress?
Yes, it is in my breakdown, I believe.
Okay. Because I really want to know.
It is... I don't know if you did watch Rings of Power Season 2. So that it's like... It's very similar to the way they portrayed it in the show. It's basically just dark, tall spires with spikes protruding out. I think it's generally one great tower in the middle surrounded by a circle wall.
Okay.
And, of course, in that circle wall, it's devoid of all life. Think of like Isengard, but a little more metallic and creepy looking. Because there's also like a general glow that's coming from the castle,
Okay.
which is supposed to be Morgoth's power.
Got it.
Just spoopy vibes, if you will.
All right.
So, what's really going to drive Middle-earth going forward is an oath that Feanor made about his little Silmarils in terms of no one else will own them, no one else will steal them, or if you steal them, great doom will fall upon the world. That's a nice little thing, Feanor, way to ruin everything. So, we will talk about that here in a second. So here we go. So this chapter starts off with Feanor. Now, of course, the Noldor elves kind of stepping foot in Middle-earth. Feanor's only he is one thought driven, and his one thought is I need to go kill Morgoth because he killed my papa, Finwë. He's not happy about that. He's obviously not happy that he took his Silmarils, his 3 perfect jewels that he created, and that's why he created this terrible oath that he's going to reclaim them, or the whole world will see doom. But he has now drug not only his army but his own kin into this. So it's not a great look for Feanor. He's starting to lose his marbles a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So power really corrupts.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of corruption we see with the One Ring that happens to, Frodo, Bilbo, Gollum, even Sauron to an extent. The same thing with the Silmarils is kind of happening to Feanor, where since he doesn't have it anymore, he has kind of that longing for them.
Got it.
And it's kind of driving him crazy. And it's the exact wrong person to drive crazy because he has that fire of like 1,000 souls in him. So, yeah, anyways, to recap, Feanor burnt the Telari ships, and he left his brother Fingolfin behind to cross the grinding ice. And Feanor really wasted no time when he got to Middle-earth. He kind of stopped in, saw the Grey Elves, kind of looked for the Sindarian Elves, didn't really find them. He's like, all right, whatever, I'm going to go mess with Morgoth now. So he heads straight to Angband, which is a mighty, mighty castle, like I just talked about. Big walls, big spiky walls. You really can't scale them. You can make siege equipment for it, but it really wouldn't work. But Feanor just kind of says, screw it. I can take him on. So this whole long siege starts at Angband. And since they can't get in, their kind of thought process is we'll just surround it, cut off all sources, and kind of trap Morgoth in there until he decides to come face them head on. Morgoth does send out great hosts of orcs to kind of just try to whittle down all the elves that Feanor has, but Feanor's host is too great. They handle the orcs at great loss, of course. But this kind of creates a false sense of security for Feanor and his elves. They're like, this is easy. Like, victory is ours. This will be fine. We'll trap him in there. He'll come out eventually, and we'll deal with it. Mm-hmm. And their constant victories just build this fire even greater within Feanor and his elves, and it kind of turns into a fury. And it's kind of implied that Feanor's axe has fire to it too. So I'm like, fire axe, that sounds cool. Okay. It's Tolkien. Melisandre? Yeah, yes. Yes. But it's Tolkien, so you don't know if it's like literal or you're just saying like he's swinging it so hard it's as if there's fire.
Right.
But anyway, it suggested that Feanor has some firepower. It's up to your interpretation of how literal Tolkien is. But yeah, Feanor thinks he's like, we got this in the bag, dude. Like, you're trapped, Morgoth. But Morgoth does have the title of Deceiver for a reason. He has some surprises waiting in the dark. And Feanor has gone just a wee bit too far. So we get into Act 1 of my breakdown. So Morgoth, as the battle starts to kind of turn, Morgoth unleashes his true terror. And this is the first time they are really seen in Middle-earth. And of course, as I'm sure it would with anyone, it causes great fear. He unleashes his Balrogs. So again, lore explanation, Balrogs are, in terms of the hierarchy of spiritual beings, again, you got Eru who's at the top, you got his Valar right here, right, his little angels right below, and then you got the elves, Valar, then you got the Maiar, which are the wizards, Gandalf, you got the elves. On the level of Maiar are the Balrogs, because the Balrogs and the wizards are essentially the same spiritual being, but Balrogs are wizards gone bad. So like that's why in the Lord of the Rings, Gandalf talks about like he can't have the ring because it's kind of implied he would turn into a Balrog himself.
Got it. Okay.
So we're talking about like dark Gandalfs at this point. Like that's some scary stuff.
These are the things that it's like you shall not pass, that thing, right?
Yes. Yeah, with the wing. The wings are actually a Jackson edition. Okay. Fun fact, but I think it's so cool. I think they're just going to keep it. But yes, it has fire sword, fire whip. We're just going to say it has wings for Jackson's sake. Yes, and horns. And it's basically a fiery demon.
Yeah.
And it's not just a few Balrogs. Like it is a whole. Tolkien says it is a host of Balrogs.
A host. Okay, great.
Usually that entails dozens, if not
He's the hostess with the mostest.
a scary host.
Yeah.
And amongst those Balrogs is the most terrifying of all of them. His name is Gothmog, Lord of the Balrogs.
Okay.
It's quite the name, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So, Feanor, kind of consumed by his wrath, he is just the confident little mother trucker that he is, charges headfirst, chopping through orcs like it's nothing. He's like, I can take on that guy. That's fine.
You can't fight fire with fire.
No.
Literally.
So, Feanor literally cuts through lines of orcs and makes the mistake of turning around and being like, oh, I am all alone in the middle of orcs and now a host of Balrogs. Yeah. So all the Balrogs kind of pounce on him at once. The POV is kind of back from where his sons are and the Elven army is, so all they can see is like flashes happening. But it's obviously a little bit too much for a boy Feanor. Yes, he's very powerful. Yes, he could probably take on all the orcs himself, but Gothmog and a host of Balrogs is just a bit too much.
Yeah.
So they strike him down, and even when they strike him down, he talks about how they still keep hitting him over and over. The elves and Feanor's sons are infuriated by this, so they charge, and they do end up pushing the orcs and the Balrogs back at great, great loss. Like, this cuts their army almost in half just to try to go rescue him. But even their rage couldn't save Feanor, and finally Gothmog deals the mortal blow, and Feanor, the greatest of all elves, one who should not be conquered, one who burns with a 1,000 souls, falls.
Mm.
So his army is demoralized, his sons are demoralized. They're like, well, if this guy's dying, we're donezo.
Right.
So as his sons kind of arrive to his body, they know it's too late to save him. Feanor's kind of doing that like cinematic, like, I see the light
Oh no.
type thing. So at the end, he sees, he finally sees the truth of like the war's lost, his Silmarils are gone, and the oath he made is just going to bring peril to Middle Earth. So he has all these kind of realizations before he dies. And with his last words, he uses them to curse Morgoth, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you tell your sons that you love them or something? Vowing that even in death, the Dark Lord would never keep the Silmarils. And then, quote, his body, made of fire and spirit, burned to ash.
Like Feanor's body?
Yeah, his body just
Just
combusts.
Like spontaneous.
Spontaneously combusts after
Okay.
he deals this oath.
Okay.
No explanation from Tolkien on why. None.
All right.
I think
Well,
it just harkens back to that, his fire has 1,000 souls situation.
Yeah.
For some reason, Tolkien loved the fire nod towards
Is it-
Feanor.
And well, isn't that a Bible thing too?
Yes.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. or
Yes,
something.
it definitely feels another religious reference,
I was only a very light Catholic.
but
so I don't-
it's a valid connection.
yeah.
So, yeah, there's no tomb, there's no grave. The wind just scatters his embers on the fields of Angband, and that's Feanor. He just fizzled out.
Literally.
Nice. So, yeah, I mean, it's just this dude got a little too cocky. I mean, this guy, I talked about a couple episodes, like if he didn't have that fight with his brothers and his dad, if his dad didn't let his mom die and go off and be a little sad sack, I think Feanor's trajectory could have been a lot different. But I think just bad event after bad event after unfortunate things happening, he just went down a bad mental path and then led thousands and thousands of elves to their death for essentially no reason.
Right.
So a very tragic story for the elves. This is a very dark time for them.
Especially the Noldor. Right?
Yes, this is the Noldor elves. This is the kind of their, especially his Noldorian elves. This is their first big setback, if you will. They're kind of leaderless.
And they're not used to death.
No.
Especially so much
Yeah,
death.
this is the first big war the elves have really been in. I mean, they kinslayed, which is a no-no, But I mean, this is on a scale that's been like no other before. So, Noldor Elves a little lost this time, a little uncertain of what to do. So now we get to Act 2,
Okay.
which is Fingolfin's arrival. A new sun arises. So we're in a very dark time. But after Feanor's fiery, disastrous end, his half-brother, Fingolfin, finally arrives to Middle-earth. And what an entrance it was, because it's described in the book of, he had to take the icy path up north.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically pictured that he comes over the crest of a hill. Think of, here we go, connection, 2 towers.
Okay, I was just gonna say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
When Gandalf shows up at the top of the hill
Yeah.
and the sun rises right above him.
Yep.
Exact same picture of Fingolfin
Okay.
showing up. The sun rises behind him.
Got it.
Because again, in Middle-earth at this time, there is still no sun.
Got it. It's still dark. Everywhere.
Yes.
Okay.
But this is Middle-earth for the first time seeing the sun. And in the sun is standing Fingolfin with his little blue and silver banner waving in the wind, looking glorious as heck.
Okay.
So this obviously reinvigorates the Noldorian elves. They finally have light. They can finally see again. And Fingolfin marches into Beleriand and kind of was like, okay, we need to tighten some things up here. It's a little amok right now.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a fun fact really quick. So the rising of the sun and the moon kind of marks the start of what is the recorded time in Middle-earth. So all the great ages, the first, second, and third, are basically measured from this point forward. So it's technically, this is year 1, and every age is called the first age of the sun. So I know when you hear of like first age, second age, third age, the full title is first age of the sun, second age of the sun, third age of the sun. So now we're talking like year 1 officially. And year 1's rough. So
Yeah.
we can only go up from here, right? Things can only get better, question mark.
Mm-hmm.
So Fingolfin, he is not just showing up, he is making a statement. He is kind of saying, I just survived the brutal crossing of the Helcaraxi, the grinding ice, and he is furious at Feanor for abandoning him, and he says, I am going to lead you guys to true victory. So, in one of the most badass moments in Elven history, he marches straight to the gates of Angband, and he challenges the Dark Lord himself to single combat.
Jon Snow moment.
I know.
Okay, all right.
I was like, finally, like this is what Feanor should have done:
Yep.
is say, I don't want Melkor, or Morgoth now. Morgoth, like your guys are dying, my guys are dying. Why don't we just sell this 1v1?
Right.
And this always takes me back to one of the greatest early 2000s movies, Troy, when we
Yep.
got to see Hector versus Achilles.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Talk about a battle scene.
Yep.
So I imagine this would go a lot like that. Anyways, Fingolfin says, Morgoth, you, me, right here, right now. And of course, Morgoth, being the wuss he is, and the conniving son of a gun that he is, does not accept the challenge. He just stays in his walls, hides behind him like a coward. And this is where the real siege of Angband starts that will go on for centuries. I mean, this is a 400-year siege.
Jeez.
Yeah.
How do they get food? Does he not need food?
So we will get into this.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, the orcs start basically, well, spoiler, the orcs kind of start eating each other.
Yeah.
It's
But
tough.
what about Morgoth? Does he not?
He doesn't need to eat.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, this moment really cements Fingolfin's reputation. Like, he is not just some second-tier leader. He is the true High King of Noldor, and soon he will prove that. So, now we get into Act 3. And I called this section Maedhros' Imprisonment and Rescue. So, the sons of Feanor are in a bit of trouble. So, after Feanor's death, Morgoth captures Maedhros, which is one of Feanor's sons.
Okay.
He is the eldest. He is described as, I think he's like 2 times the size of Feanor in terms of height. I mean, he's a big boy.
And Feanor was
Feanor is also big. So
Yeah.
like this, Maedhros he's a warrior. Like he's not a great leader.
he's a tank.
Yes, he's a tank. He's not described. His wits aren't great, but his warrior prowess is talked
He's a
about.
linebacker.
Yes, he is hitting the A gap, if you will.
But the reading and the writing were not there.
No,
Okay.
the literacy and
I'm just
all
kidding.
that.
To anybody who's a linebacker, I'm only joking. Sorry.
I mean, I was, but it's fine. So the sons are all still there. We've got Fingolfin also kind of messing around there.
Okay.
So Morgoth, in his conniving little manner, sneaks out because what happened is, and I actually forgot to recap this here in writing, but I remember anyway. So the sons of Feanor went behind Fingolfin's back and decided we're going to try to meet with Morgoth one-on-one and have a discussion of peace. And of course, Fingolfin would not have that. So that's why they kind of had to sneak to it. So the Feanor's sons planned for this to be a trap. They knew it could be a trap. So they brought a great host of guys with them. But Morgoth brought even more guys because, of course, it's Morgoth. So they get into another kind of mini skirmish. Feanor and his sons fall back, but Maedhros gets caught. And Morgoth takes Maedhros captive. Yes. So, Morgoth, again, a very smart guy, not a linebacker. He was probably in AP calculus. He, rather than kill him, Morgoth chains him to the cliffs of Thangorodrim. And he leaves him hanging by his wrist for years.
Oh,
yeah.
What is thing?
It's just a mountain right above Angband,
Okay.
basically.
Got it.
So it's just, think of like a cliff. So here, there for you visual people. So the castle's in the middle between a ton of mountains. Like it's a scape of mountains, castle in the middle. On the side, there's a cliff that kind of hangs over, and there's basically a tree there that hangs over as well. And he's basically hanging him from his wrists, from the tree, from one branch. You know, it's just shackles with one chain, and he's just hanging there. And I mean, this is for years, I mean, decades that he's just hanging here. So I want to talk about this as a brilliant move from Morgoth, because if Maedhros dies, the Noldor will just rally around him as kind of a martyr figure. And this will kind of, enrage them again, and it would just start an even deadlier war for Morgoth that he would probably lose. But by keeping them alive, he actually weakens the Noldor because, again, it's clear to Fingolfin's Noldorian elves that he is the king. The Feanor Noldor elves are still a little more biased towards Feanor's sons, especially Maedhros being the biggest and the strongest. So they're still not too keen on joining Fingolfin quite yet, and that's kind of why they went behind his back. So Morgoth knows all of that, and he says, all right, instead of killing this guy and making him a martyr and having all the Noldor elves unite, I'm just going to keep him captive, which is going to just demoralize half the Noldorian army and give me an advantage. So I thought, he is a conniving son of a gun, but he's pretty smart. So with the Feanor Noldor elves leadership just in pure chaos, because now we have several other Feanor sons who are like, I deserve the throne. No, I deserve the throne. Doing that kind of back and forth. And it's making the Noldorian elves become sex even more, because now you have a portion of them that want to follow one son, a portion that want to follow another, and it's just creating a divide. And Morgoth watches this from the shadows, and it talks about he laughs from the shadows as he watches. Yes, he's doing the little, what do you call this? The finger roll, if you will.
Yeah.
But he made the right move, and I think it was a genius move. So fun fact, I think this scene kind of mirrors what Sauron later does to Gollum in Lord of the Rings. Like, he very easily could have just killed him, but he just tortures him long enough and makes him desperate enough to, one, give him info, but also know that he'll be useful later.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the same thing that, the apprentice learns from the master type thing.
Okay.
But now, one of Feanor's sons, Fingon the Valiant, enters the chat. So, to Act 4 we go. Fingon, also, this is one of, sorry, I got it wrong. This is one of Fingolfin's sons.
Oh, okay.
Not Feanor, my bad.
he's a
We got
cousin.
a lot of names that it really throws me.
Yeah. He's finna gone somewhere.
Finnegan to save my cousin. So Fingon, he ain't about to let Maedhros rot in that prison. He's like, nah, if somebody's got to save this freaking guy, I guess I'll do it. So even though their houses are divided, he still sees him as a brother, as family. So he does the impossible. Fingon does sneak alone into Morgoth's territory, armed with nothing but his bow. And he searches Thangordrim for days, unable to find Maedhros, and in desperation begins to sing, as one does. It reminds me of that scene from Frozen 2, where Elsa sings into
I should know this, but I don't.
She sings out to try to find her mom.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And I felt like this was a very Frozen 2 moment.
All right. My favorite part of Frozen 2 is when the wind blows and then Olaf goes, Samantha.
It's very similar. So he sings out, and from the cliffs above, he hears a voice, and it is Maedhros answering his song. So we're back to the music trope. Tolkien loves him some music. But there is a problem. When he gets up there, Morgoth's chains cannot be broken. So Maedhros is basically, he's hanging too high up. He's been shooting his bows and arrows at the actual chain part of the bracelet. It's not breaking. It's too strong. And Fingon feels a little defeated. He's like, I don't really know what to do here. But then a very common theme in Lord of the Rings happens. Mm-hmm. Thorondor, the king of the eagles, swoops in. These guys always come in handy.
Yep. A
little swoop. Every time you need them, they show up.
Yeah.
Even though they're technically not affiliated with any party, they always show up and help.
Well, they're Americans.
They are. So he swoops in. And quick fun fact, I have to interject once again. Thorondor is the exact same eagle that will later rescue Gandalf from the top of Isengard in Fellowship. So when Saruman does that, they had that little staff battle. It's sick.
Yeah.
And he gets thrust to the top of the Tower of Isengard. It's actually Thorondor who comes and saves Gandalf from that.
He blows the moth.
Yes. Yeah. That is how you summon.
But can we also recap? I think we talked about this in another episode, but just to reiterate, no, the eagles couldn't have just picked up Frodo and dropped him at the...
Don't even get me started.
Okay. It's not how the eagles work.
It's not how they work. If they did that, the Nazgul would have caught them anyway.
Okay.
I've had this debate a lot with people, and it is the worst. But anyways, Thorondor carries Fingon up to Maedhros, but the chains still won't break. So, with no other choice, Maedhros begs Fingon to kill him.
Oh.
I know, this poor guy. But Fingon said, I won't have that. You're living today.
Whether you like it or not.
Except you're living maybe without a hand.
Oh, dear.
So, yeah, he decides to... Because, again, he's hanging from one piece of chain, both wrists.
This is like a Saw moment.
It is, truly. So if he cuts off one hand, theoretically, he'll fall and be free. So that's what he does. He decides to cut off one of Maedhros' hands, and the chains loosen, and Thorondor carries them both to safety.
Okay.
And this is another pivotal moment because Maedhros... This is a very humbling moment for him because he kind of had the same fire his dad had, not as near as powerful, but just the same anger. Mm-hmm. But this really humbles him and kind of tames him, if you will. So he actually takes this and renounces his claim to the High Kingship, which is a big deal because no one's ever done that. And it was very... If you're a son of Feanor, you didn't think that would happen based off of who Feanor is. But he renounces his claim, and he declares that Fingolfin is the true ruler of Noldor. And the houses of Feanor and Fingolfin, once on the brink of civil war, are united once again. And Maedhros, who is now a one-handed warrior, becomes one of the greatest leaders of Noldor because Fingolfin, in return, says, I appreciate your humbleness, and I will make you a great general of my army. So, another quick fun fact is that this is the first of many legendary one-handed warriors in Tolkien's world. There are more in the Silmarillion, but a big one is Beren. He loses a hand. We all know that Frodo loses a finger. And even Sauron himself is defeated when Isildur cuts the one ring from his hand. So, a big hand thing.
Jaime Lannister loses a hand.
Yes, we have a Westerosi connection. So yeah, a big hand theme as well. But now we are into Act 5. I promise we're getting close to the end. This is just a very long chapter.
That's all right. We're locked in.
We are at the Siege of Angband begins. And like I said, this is now with Noldor united, they can now have a united front against Morgoth and his fortress. They decide to build fortresses all along Angband on the outside, They start securing alliances with the Grey Elves. They send a lot of diplomats to the Sindarian Elves, which that'll be a big topic in the next chapter. But the Elves are now, even though they just went through all this loss and chaos and losing their king, actually kind of reach a time of peace and another gold age for them. So while they kind of have, because, Angband is now, they're trapped by mountains, so Morgoth can't retreat north. And they build all their fortresses on the south, so he can't go anywhere that way. So we have essentially contained the evil for now. And like I said, this is a 400-year-long siege. So that gives the elves 400 years to really prosper in terms of weapons, in terms of society, in terms of relationships. That's why it's kind of a golden age for them, even though it's technically a time of war. It is rather peaceful because Morgoth doesn't sacrifice more orcs. The elves don't rush the walls because, again, they can't be scaled. So it's just kind of a stalemate.
Okay.
But the elves, they establish great kingdoms, including Gondolin, which is a massive one. I mean, that's one, for any of you big Tolkien nerds, Gondolin is a big thing, especially for men. And obviously it sounds like Gondor.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yes, it's kind of the ancestor of Gondor.
Okay.
And Nargothrond is another big one for the elves that will be talked about. And like I said, Gondolin kind of becomes the most influential kingdom for men in the First Age. And now the elves, again, they believe they have Morgoth trapped, but they do underestimate him. I mean, it's Morgoth, and he's always got some tricks up his sleeve, and let's just say this trick has wings and can breathe fire. Yeah.
Is it a dragon?
It's a dragon.
Okay.
So while the Nordor kind of celebrate their victories, Morgoth, he is not idle. He's still working inside that castle. So there are still some things going on. And deep beneath Angband, he is plotting a counterstrike that will shatter the world, quite literally. So that's where we end.
Okay.
I know. It's a big chapter.
It is big.
A lot happened. We're getting pretty dark now. We're getting a little more gritty, less.
We cut a hand off today.
We cut a hand off, and we lost a king who spontaneously combusted. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we are now into kind of the more constant tone that is Lord of the Rings, where yes, there is a clear side of good and evil, but it's definitely gritty and full of pain and sorrow, but a lot of happiness too. So now we are at the Austin reads the dramatic ChatGPT outro.
Okay.
Do you like that they added this?
I did.
It just says in parentheses, echoing voice.
Was that like an effect you put on it?
Oh no.
Undo. There we go.
No, it's I think because I think when ChatGPT does this, they try to write like a script, and in a script you would put
I see.
how the voice should sound. I think
thought
that's
you
what they were
added
doing.
that.
No, I will do that though.
Okay.
I have to now.
Yeah.
Anyways, echoing voice.
The Noldor stands strong. The Dark Lord is besieged, and for the first time since the fall of the trees, the elves taste hope. But in the depths of Angband, something stirs. A shadow darker than any before. And when it rises, no wall, no oath, no crown will be enough to stop it. The war for Middle-earth has just begun.
Boom.
Boom.
Oh, yeah, look at it. We nailed it. Yeah. I mean,
All
they're
right.
really good at that.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's Middle-earth today.
Okay.
Again, a little longer. Thank you for sticking with
right.
it, but it's a long chapter. A lot happens, but now, ladies and gentlemen, we just go. So yeah, like I said, next episode is going to be a lot of I'm calling it a Westerosi type episode
Okay.
because it's going to be a lot more map talk and a lot more. These next few chapters are going to throw a lot of names. I'm going to do a similar thing and just kind of talk about the important names and what happens with those relationships. I would also really like to. I'm going to send Abby a map for next week's episode, so you guys can. I would like to post it before the episode gets posted, so you guys can kind of follow along if you want to, and where we're at in the map and who's talking to who.
Perfect.
It's going to be a lot of history lore dump next week because, again, this is during the 400-year siege, so Morgoth's big move isn't still for a bit, but it's a nice setup to where the elves are at, what the men are doing, and those plot lines will progress, so it'll be good.
Okay.
But that's it for Middle-earth today.
Heyo.
I know.
Welcome to the Kingdom of Iron Isles.
Woo!
We have arrived at a Westerosi archipelago off the western shores in the Sunset Sea.
That was one heck of a sentence.
Isn't it? It is. There's actually 31 isles total, but only 7 of them are major islands.
Them's a lot of isles.
It's a lot of isles. It's an archipelago.
Well, of course.
These islands have names, of course.
Of course. We always name things.
Yeah. There's Old Wick,
Hmm.
Great Wick, Harlaw, Salt Cliff, Black Tide, Orkmont, and Pike.
I feel like I've heard of Pike before.
Yes, Pike we'll talk about it in a minute. But Harlaw has the most people, Great Wick has the most mining, and Old Wick is said to be the holiest island.
Oh. Old gods or new gods?
There's a whole separate god that we're going to meet today. So neither.
Great.
So even though Great Wick is the biggest, land-wise, size-wise, not people-wise, just size-wise, the Ironborn people in present-day Game of Thrones are ruled from the castle on Pike because that's where the Greyjoys hail from. So that's kind of their capital now. It was not always their capital, but it is now. But bastards born here in the Iron Islands take the last name Pike. So there's a lot of those running around because,
of course.
they be having a lot of
They
those.
do be
over
having
there.
a lot of fun time.
These islands are all very small, very rocky, barely fertile. The skies here are typically gray. The sea around the islands is stormy, and it rains often. So if you're excited to go visit,
I was just going to say.
then I hope you're not, because I don't want to go visit here.
Do you think he's basing this off of like a real
I don't know.
place?
I don't know.
Like, Scotland's kind of nice, but like it's also kind of rocky.
Yeah, but it's not an island.
That's true. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Also, another fun fact, most of these islands are uninhabited. It's really just those 7 that are habited. Is that the word?
Yes.
Okay.
Inhabited?
Inhabited is not habited. We're spending a lot of time on this.
Yeah, I can't. You guys know what we mean.
Yeah. Anyway, the Iron Islands technically get left out of the count of the 7 kingdoms.
Oh.
So just if you need a visual, here we go. We got the North, we got the Riverlands, we got the Vale, we got the Reach, the Westerlands, Dorne, and the Stormlands. There's 7. And I did not say the Iron Islands because they're really not part of the 7.
Dang. They got excluded.
They get excluded, yeah. And neither are the Crown Lands, which we'll get to in a future episode, which is like the lands around King's Landing are considered the Crown Lands, and they're not included either. So yeah, they're part of the 7 kingdoms-ish. But they are pretty hard to forget about. So we're not going to forget about them. We're going to talk about them.
We will give them their time in the sun today.
Yeah, for sure. Most people in Westeros refer to these people as Iron Men, but they call themselves Ironborn. Yes. Their culture revolves around seafaring, and they have their religion or their faith is in the drowned god.
Yes. Now I remember this now.
So basically their entire religion revolves around the ocean. But not in a fun Moana way, just to be clear. Not that way. This is a whole separate way. The islands used to be forested, but the trees were all cut down to make ships, and it's believed that this is what first drove the Ironborn to start to pillage nearby lands for all of their goods.
I'm feeling some Viking type culture going on here.
There's some of that as well, yes. Like we'll get into it. But their life is pretty bleak. Like they live on these rocky, not fertile little places that it's always raining, it's always gray. You have to like go steal from somebody else to get anything that you might need because you don't have access to it on your home. So anyway.
This might sound bad, but like no wonder they're popping out so much kids because there's nothing else to do.
Well, yeah, that's true. So they're pretty hardened to some aspects of society that are considered the norm in the rest of Westeros. So, for example, they still employ indentured servants, which is basically slaves
Yep.
to do all of their manual labor,
Mm.
even though that practice has been outlawed in all of the other kingdoms and religions, really. Like the old gods don't like slavery, the new gods don't like slavery, but the drowned god gets down,
He'd be okay with.
I guess, They also allow men to take one rock wife, which is their real wife that bears and raises the children. But men can also take as many salt wives as they want.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Oh boy.
Salt wives. It's not funny about wild.
It's just
Salt
it's tough.
wives are women that they steal from the land. So your salt wife's not going to be from the Iron Islands.
Ooh.
She's going to be from the Westeros. And then they bring them back to the Iron Islands. They are kept kind of, but they're not slaves. It is real clear in the...
They're captives.
They're captives, but they are not slaves. They are seen as like lesser in society, but their children can inherit lands the same as children from Rockwife. So they're not bastards. They don't have to take the last name and all that. They're still considered a weird kind of married-ish. So anyway, yeah, there's that.
Poor women.
Yep.
Jeez.
Yeah. So also the Iron Islands, we're going to switch gears off of that sad topic to talk about mining.
Right.
The Iron Islands have a mining industry. It is not like gold and silver like in the Westerlands. They're not just, drowning in gold and lots of expensive metals, but they do have iron, tin, and lead are their main metals.
Like those are important.
Yes. But the mining work is left to all the indentured servants.
Well, there it is.
Yes. So yeah, there's not a lot in the way of an economy on the Iron Island. So naturally, they're pretty prone to reaving and raiding the shores of Westeros to obtain whatever they might need.
What a great, just nice set of people, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Let's go vacation at the Iron Islands, huh?
Right. Yes. Historically, the islands were never inhabited by the children of the forest or the giants, which I think is interesting. And I think that maybe, does that play into it? Like, is that why they're so disconnected from, human nature, I guess, maybe?
Could be.
There's no spirit of, the old gods or
There's
anything.
no spirit of life there whatsoever.
Yeah. But they were settled by humans thousands and thousands of years ago. There's a lot of debate. I could have went in whole hog on this, but I didn't. There's a lot of debate in the Maesters as to which humans settled it first. Was it, the first men? Was it some random race of men from across the Sunset Sea? Nobody really knows. And anyway, the Ironborn, they have their own version of who they are. So we'll get into that in just a second. But anyway, to summarize, the old gods have no sway here. There's no magic or werewoods or any of that. None of that exists here. But the faith of the Ironborn, which is called faith in the drowned god, they preach that they are a completely different race than any of the men that ever ventured to Westeros from Essos. There's an ancient priest of the drowned god. His name is Sauron Salttongue.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Sauron.
We have a Tolkien reference.
We do. And he acknowledged that somewhere. I think that I don't know, in the public, in an interview or something, he was like, it's
very fitting for Sauron to be in this culture.
Yeah. Yes. So this Sauron Salttongue is a priest of the drowned god. He says that the Ironborn came to these islands from the sea, and here's a quote, "from inside the watery halls of the drowned god, who gives them dominion over all the waters of the earth."
Oh. Okay.
So, yeah, they just came up from the sea.
Yeah,
So
they're mermaids.
And this is where they picked. They didn't want the land that's nice. They picked these Iron Islands.
Because they're mermaids.
Right.
Oh, that's my new lore. That's my lore.
They in these books they don't say mermaid, they say merling.
Oh.
But yeah,
they're merlings, in my opinion.
Same, not same.
We are same.
So yes. Yeah. Then there's...
It's funny because I think... Sorry, we're harking back
good.
to Sauron for a second.
You're good.
I like that he called him Salt Tongue because there's a lot of times that Sauron is described as having a serpent tongue.
Okay.
So I like that
yes.
little nod too.
Yes, that is clever.
Connections.
Connections are connecting. But again, there's lots and lots of people, maesters included, who think the Ironborn are probably just descended from first men, like most of the rest of Westeros. The only caveat to this theory that I think is interesting is let's not forget that the first men were no good at sailing. They could barely sail rivers. That was when the Andals came over. They were a lot better at sailing, and they kind of had to teach the first men how to build proper boats and stuff. So, like, if it was the first men, how'd they get there?
Wait, yeah, what?
Yeah.
That's a confusing little conundrum.
Yeah. So who knows? But yeah. The
We
end.
need more lore.
We need more. more
lore.
So let's dive in on the drowned god. Get it?
I see.
Get it?
I see what you did there.
The drowned god is a bit of a mystery because there's no temples, books, or statues that represent him or describe his likeness.
Kind of sound like a fake god at this point.
Doesn't it? It is said that every Ironborn is made in his likeness, so he looks kind of like them if you smushed all their faces
All right.
together, maybe.
Yeah.
But he's basically, they believe he's the creator of the sea and of their race. So other than the fact that he supposedly created them, we don't really know what he looks like, but he has a lot of priests, a lot of priests.
Oh,
and,
really?
And they sure do have a certain look about them. So let's talk about and a smell probably too.
Oh.
The priests of the drowned god are usually, this is how they're described. Usually unkempt, barefoot, dressed in rags, often seen wandering near the sea because they do not have permanent homes.
Oh.
They do not bathe except when they wander into the sea. Some of them only eat fish.
Oh.
They are usually illiterate, and their traditions and prayers are passed on orally.
Well, sounds like we got a bunch of golems. Oh my god.
A bunch of smelly fish eaten.
Smeagol's.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh my lord.
When they encounter Ironborn people, those people are obliged to feed them and provide shelter.
Of course.
They look kind of like homeless madmen, I think. And they probably are, really,
Yeah.
like, to be honest. But they do hold a good deal of power on the islands. Like, they're looked...
They're like respected.
They're like revered, I guess. Yeah.
Revered
Yeah.
is a good word.
So, what do they preach? These priests, they preach the faith of the drowned god, and most of them preach the old way, which is capitalized, old, like capital O, capital W, old way.
It's formal.
Some of them are a little bit, they think the old way is old and needs to stay in the past, but for the most part, the priests especially are going to be preaching the old way. So, let's just talk about what the old way is. It is the traditional historical version where the main tenets of this faith or religion are, I'm going to list them for you. Plunder, which just means pay the iron price rather than the
Yes.
gold price.
Heard that one.
That's in the show. Which just means you stole it rather than paid for it. Like you should steal, not pay. So plunder. We have labor. That's a tenet, which means fishing is the only acceptable form of labor. No farming, no mining. You shouldn't have to do any of that because if you need any of that stuff, you just go steal it. The next one is axe and sword. So all of their fights are supposed to be done basically like man-to-man combat. They don't believe in siege weapons or anything like that. It should
We're
all
going to
be
settle this man to man.
Yeah. Yes. And then thraldom, which is their indentured servants, slaves. Salt wives, and then the last one is kind of a random one, but they use salt water to heal wounds as well as perform execution.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good. Okay.
So there you go. We should be stealing. We should be only fishing, nothing else.
And we should be settling this man to man.
Man to man, and let all of our slaves do the harder work for us. Yes. So that's basically it. To follow this faith, that's all you got to do. Another facet of this old way is that there is this pretty famous kind of badass ceremony called a king's moot. and those get held to elect the next high king. A king's moot is pretty cool, I think, anyway. There's not a lot about the Iron Islands that are cool, but this, I think, is one of the few things that is. If a king's moot is held, it is held on this place on Old Wick, which is one of the islands, but there's this hill called Naga's Hill, and we're going to talk more about why it's called that later. But on that hill, the priests of the drowned god call for a king's moot anytime one of their high kings dies. So, and it's kind of a democracy-ish. So really, any man, you have to be a man.
Of course.
And you have to be the captain of a ship. So if you're a white property-owning male,
That's essentially what I'm hearing, yes.
You can participate, you can like put your name in to be potentially elected as the next high king. And it's a ceremony, and you have to kind of like talk about, it's basically like a campaign, like why you deserve the throne. Yeah, like a debate, like a debate night, but for kings, I guess. So, if you're a captain and you choose to submit yourself, you have to persuade all of your peers to your cause. You can do this several ways. You can talk about how good you are as a captain at sea. You can talk about, or you could just give like a really captivating speech. You can hand out as many gifts to as many people in attendance as you can. But what you're trying to accomplish is to get everybody there to start shouting your name instead of other people's names. So once a vast majority of the participants, because then there's just like all the, lesser men there in attendance, once a considerable number of those people in attendance start to shout your name, then the king's moot is over and you become...
What a way to settle that.
The next high king, yes.
Wow.
Yep. So yeah, king's moot.
A king's moot.
King's moot. Interestingly, the crowns of the high kings are all made from driftwood, not any kind of metal, just driftwood from the ocean.
They don't need nothing fancy.
Nope. But then when a king dies, they take his driftwood crown and they crack it, and then they return it to the ocean. They give it back to the ocean. So a new king must then create his own crown out of driftwood.
There's a little symbolic meaning there.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting because it's different than most of the other crowns that have just been hanging out in Westeros for thousands of years, being passed from one generation to the next. This is something different, which is kind of cool. The Archmaesters down in Old Town, they disagree on when the most recent King's Moot was held. It was either 4,000 or 2,000 years ago.
Oh, that's just a small little gap of time. Yeah.
Some thousand years ago. However, lest we forget, in A Feast for Crows, Euron Greyjoy wins a King's Moot. They have a King's Moot. It's told from Asha's point of view, which is Theon's sister.
Was this in the show?
No.
Oh,
the show left it out.
That would have been cool.
And I got real mad about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been really cool. And this is where, at this King's Moot, where Euron Greyjoy wins. We're going to talk more about Euron in a little bit, but this is where he blows the Horn of Winter.
My gosh.
Or whatever horn he has. He has a horn. We assume it's the Horn of Winter, and he blows it. But then the chapter ends, and we don't ever go back to Asha.
He has to in the next book, essentially.
Basically, yeah.
If he gets off his lazy bum.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that. Now you know what a King's Moot is, and now you know why it was important. Hopefully you kind of already did if you read the books, but if not, now you know.
I think it's funny they call it King's Moot. There has to be something to the word moot, because then in Tolkien lore, when the Ents meet to talk about if they want to invade Isengard or not, they call it an Ent moot.
I didn't know that.
There's got to be some kind of moot must be meeting or something.
The
I wonder.
Connecting. Yeah.
Ent
maybe.
moot, King's Moot. Another connection.
I thought moot meant like you say, like it's a moot point.
Right.
Doesn't that mean it's a bad?
It's not. Yeah. It's like a negative word, I thought, but I don't know.
Who knows?
We'll have to look it up.
All right.
Let us know in the comments.
Yes, please. Okay. So, aside from the drowned god, they don't believe in the old gods. They definitely don't believe in the new gods. So aside from those two choices, there is this one other god that the priests of the drowned god acknowledge, but not in a good way. That is the storm god.
Oh.
They claim that the drowned god and the storm god are ancient enemies and have been at war with each other since the beginning of time. The drowned god loves his ironborn people, but the storm god hates them and is always trying to send in wind and lightning and thunder and hurricanes and all that to steer them off their courses. So there's some rituals that go along with this faith that are pretty intense. It's risky. Risky rituals up in here. The priests perform this ritual that is called the Kiss of Life. But is it? And
I'm scared to find out what this means.
yeah, they do it to people to signify that that person is a committed follower of the drowned god.
Okay.
But this involves literally drowning him and then hopefully resuscitating him.
Oh, now I see what you mean by risky. Yeah, what happens if he doesn't get resuscitated?
Right. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it doesn't work, and it's like baptism on steroids, kind of like.
Yeah. Hey, let me drown you, and if you come back, you get a high five.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
So
A kiss
the kiss
of
of
life.
or death. Maybe.
What about like a smothering of life?
Yes.
Oh my God.
There is a tamer version now. There
Oh,
didn't
okay.
always used to be. There is now. That is to simply provide a blessing in which this is basically baptism. Like the person kneels in the water while the priest pours salt water over his head. The priest says, "Let your servant be born again from the sea as you were. Bless him with salt, bless him with stone, and bless him with steel." And then that dude has to reply, "What is dead may never die."
Oh, that's where that comes from?
And the priest responds, "But rises harder and stronger."
Oh, that's
did-
way nicer.
We saw that happen to Theon. We saw that.
Okay.
Yeah. Although they did drown him, I think.
This is way nicer.
No, Theon got drowned.
Oh, he got drowned?
But then they resuscitated
I
him.
don't remember this.
Yeah.
In the show?
Yeah.
I gotta rewatch.
Yes. But I do like that. I already said this, I think, but I really don't like hardly anything about the Ironborn, but this is a cool little phrase, minus the drowning.
The baptism one thing is nice. Let's just
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that's the title of our episode this week. So,
Perfect.
there you go. All right. So let's talk more about those driftwood crowns that we said we were going to talk about.
Yes.
The OG of the driftwood crowns was a man that legend has named the Grey King.
Hmm.
We don't really know his real name other than the Grey King, but he ruled the sea and married a mermaid.
Mermaid.
A merling maid.
They're real?
I guess. I guess.
Okay. I did not. I preemptively called that.
So he did this, married her, so that his children could live either on land or in the sea. So there you go.
Huh.
That's why. He's described. Yeah. He's described as having gray eyes, gray hair, and a gray beard, hence why he's called the Grey
The
King.
Great King. It fits.
But he purposely made his crown out of driftwood so that everyone would know that his kingship was granted by the drowned god. So, legends, there's a lot of them, and they attribute a lot of things to this Grey King during the Age of Heroes. But I have a feeling it's similar to some of those other famous people from other, regions like Bran the Builder, Lan the Clever, people like that, where it's hard to fact check anything because it happened so long ago. So we don't really know if he did all the things that the legends say
Yeah,
he
I'm
did.
sure it could be exacerbated a little bit.
But the most famous thing that he did was to slay the world's largest sea dragon.
Oh.
And her name was Naga.
That's where the hill came from.
Yes. She was so large that she ate giant krakens for dinner, literally. That was her.
Oh, this is a pretty
Meals.
impressive feat then, I would say.
Yes. So once he slayed her, he built a huge castle around her carcass and like her bones. Like that was the structure of his castle.
Huh. Use what you got,
Yeah. So there's this, her rib cage basically is like the beams of the long haul in this big giant castle.
I mean, I gotta say, like, I'm not one for people who go hunting and they have like a trophy room. That freaks me.
Mhm.
Like, if you slay a giant what'd you call it? Sea snake?
Sea dragon.
Sea dragon? Yeah, I would probably flaunt that too. So
So yeah, and there are still some petrified bones of some giant sea creature on top of Nagus Hill on
there's-
Old
there
Wick.
is- there's
So
there's a little bit of evidence there.
yeah, and that is why the king's moots are always held there.
Huh.
So the Grey King ruled all of the Iron Islands from that castle, supposedly for 1,000 years. That's a long
It's a long haul.
time. Yeah. And then one day he just decided to take off his driftwood crown. He tossed it into the ocean, and then he walked into the sea to take his place next to the drowned god.
Okay, he just had enough.
He just said, "I'm out."
I've done all I can do. It's up
Mhm.
to you, Chief. That's probably what he said. Verbatim.
Exactly. He left 100 sons behind him.
Gee, okay.
100.
I thought he was just talking to one son. He's talking to okay,
hundreds. They promptly all start to argue over which of them should take his place. They all start to kill each other.
Oh,
I guess the drowned god is also chill with kinslaying.
he don't care about nothing.
But they went pretty quickly from 100 to 16.
It's a battle royale.
These 16 divided up the islands between them, and to this day, all of the great houses of the Ironborn claim descent from one of those 16.
Wow.
So, whether all of that is true or legend, it did come to be that eventually each individual island was ruled independently of the others, and they were each ruled by 2 kings, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
And the 2 kings were referred to this way. There's always a rock king and a salt king, just like a rock wife and a salt wife. The rock king is the one that stays on the island to rule it, take care of settling disputes, make laws, blah, 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 make sure the economy's fine. The salt king is the one that commands the fleet at sea, and they take the longboats to go get, the supplies and stuff that
Good
are
little system.
needed. Yeah. Normally, the rock king is like the older, wiser one of the 2, and then the salt king would be the young, go-getter. But that's not always the case, but it just usually was. But both kings, no matter which island they were going to rule, all of them were always selected at a king's moot on Nagus Hill.
Wow.
So there you go. The centuries that followed the Grey King were kind of a golden age for the Iron Islands, and they were kind of just, reaving, pillaging all along
Just having a grand old time.
all up and down the western coast, from the Reach to the Westerlands, Riverlands, all the way up to the north. They kind of just went wherever they needed to get whatever they needed. And towards the end of the Age of Heroes, however, this practice gives way to something a little more sinister. At this point, this is when they start to try to conquest and colonize the lands on the shores. Ultimately, that's going to prove to be their undoing, but they were pretty successful at it for several thousand years. So
It does feel a little Viking-ish. I feel like that's where a lot of this draws from. I'm only mentioning this
Yeah.
because we are very Swedish. Swanson, Svensson, some Viking roots.
just a little bit.
Just a skosh.
Just a little smidge. But yeah, it worked for them for a long time, but anytime you go and try to conquer somebody and all you're doing is taking from them, you're never giving anything in return.
Doesn't usually end well.
Doesn't go well. But if you remember back to the episode where we talked about the Riverlands, there is a good chunk of time where the Ironborn controlled Harrenhal, which is way inland. It's
Yeah, so they got pretty
almost
far.
Yeah, it's almost in the middle of Westeros itself. So, yeah, that's it. Black Heron is the one that built Harrenhal, and he was from the Iron Islands. So, yeah, crazy to think that they got that far.
Wow.
They were that successful. But eventually, like we said, the people who lived on land built up a big enough grudge that they were determined to get stronger, smarter, all of that in how they were going to fight off the Ironborn. And then once each little region started to see some success, it was kind of just a snowball effect. Then they all began to borrow each other's ideas. Sometimes they banded together, even though, we're from the north, but you're from the Riverlands. We're going to ally to fight off the Ironborn. So yeah, all of that kind of leaves the Ironborn in a pretty weak position. And this is about where the Greyjoys enter the chat. So, you ready to meet them?
The Greyjoys. I know a few of them.
All right, perf. They actually kind of flew under the radar for most of the history of the Iron Island, which surprised me. I skipped a lot of the Age of the Heroes stuff, but there was these two other houses called the Grey Irons and the Good Brothers. Those were kind of the two biggest, most well-known families at the time. The Greyjoys were there, but because they're from Pike, which is small, they just weren't making history as much as these other two houses.
Nothing noteworthy.
Right. So, they do hail from Pike. It's a smaller and a poorer island than the three big ones, which are Oldwick, Greatwick, and Harlaw. But they do descend from a son of the Grey King, one of the 16 that survived, and they've always been successful at King's Moots for Pike. They've never really been contested on Pike itself, so there's that too. When Aegon the Conqueror shows up, he pretty easily got the kings of the Iron Islands to bend the knee because he had that dragon that can very easily burn ships.
Yeah, I would bend too.
No. And a lot of Aegon's advisors suggested making the Iron Islands vassals of either the Riverlands or the Westerlands. And he kind of almost did it. But in the end, he decided to let them stay independent and to choose their own Lord Paramount. So they all ended up agreeing on this guy named Vicon. I don't know if it's Vicon or Vicon Greyjoy. Without any fuss. They just kind of picked him. And thus began the reign of House Greyjoy as Lords Paramount of the Iron Islands.
Oh.
He was selected. He had this famous throne called the Sea Stone Chair moved to the Great Keep of Pike so that he could use it to rule.
Got to have a good chair if you're going to rule. I mean,
You
it's just. I feel like it's part of the description of ruling Westeros.
Yes.
You must have a sick chair.
Yes. And this throne in particular is kind of underrated, I think. I don't really think the show did it justice because I don't remember it.
I do, but
it
was, not very noteworthy.
No.
I mean, it was just kind of an iron chair.
Yeah. What it's described as in here is being this gigantic seat carved out of this it's so black that it looks like oil. This oily black stone, and it's carved in the shape of a kraken.
Oh, that would be sick.
That would. It's unclear exactly where the Sea Stone Chair was kept before it was brought to Pike, but it was somewhere else. Like, this is Vicon Greyjoy brought it to Pike. So yeah.
I approve of this chair.
But it is a big deal, the chair.
Yes, you must.
And then speaking of this great keep of Pike, let's talk about it for a second. It's incredibly old. It's so old, no one knows for sure when it was built or by who.
Oh.
It was originally much larger than it is now, but it was built on top of a bunch of stony cliffs that are right on top of the ocean. So,
erosion.
Yes, erosion be happening.
Erosion be doing its thing.
They're just constantly pounded by waves and storms. So a lot of it has been broken or has just completely fallen off over time.
Ooh.
And what is left now is just a bunch of towers and keeps scattered across a bunch of tiny little islets. Not an island, like an islet.
Small.
Yeah. And all of these are connected by bridges. Some of the bridges are stone. Some of them are rope. So the rope ones are obviously a little more treacherous. At the front, like where you can enter the castle from like the rest of the island, there is still a section of a curtain wall that remains from the original structure. That's the only part of the original structure that remains that hasn't had to be, replaced over time. So yeah.
Huh.
That's Pike.
I want to know who built it.
Pretty bleak.
It still does not sound like a great place to live.
No. So after Aegon the Conqueror took control, the Greyjoys and the Iron Islands kind of fell in line and acquiesced to the rule of the Targaryens for a little over 100 years. They even, for a little bit, little spurts of time, they would allow septons to come and preach there. A lot of the people were kind of against that.
Blasphemy, I was going to say.
But they didn't want to mess with Aegon. And since Aegon kind of had aligned with the Seven, then they were like, well, we don't want to make him mad. So.
Yeah, he's got dragon stuff, you know?
Yeah. So then a little over 100 years later, then this guy named Dalton Greyjoy was born. And he is said to have loved only 3 things: the sea, his sword, and women.
Well, at least he knows what he wants, I
Yep.
guess.
He sailed to the Basilisk Isles and to Old Geese, which are not close to each other, and they're both hard to get to. He took 4 salt wives,
Oh.
and he stole a Valyrian steel sword and named it Nightfall, all by the age of 14.
Hey, excuse me?
Yeah,
14?
14.
Okay, this guy's a go-getter.
Yeah. And because he's raised in this generation, so they're about 100 years into the Targaryen rule at this point. So if we think about like 100 years ago, it would be like World War I. Like we grew up hearing tales of World War I and stuff like that. So he's in this generation of young boys who were raised with tales of the old way. That's still kind of recent history where we could just go reeve and get whatever we want, steal it from anyone. So he's kind of like part of this little crew that's trying to go back to that, basically, essentially.
Go back to their roots.
Yes. So at the age of 16, the Dance of the Dragons broke out all over Westeros. And unfortunately, at this point, I have to stop telling his story because I don't want to give any spoilers. But I sincerely hope that he pops up in season 3 of House of the Dragon because he plays a pretty big part in the dance once he gets involved. It takes him a minute to get involved. Once he does get involved, he kind of develops or earns himself this little nickname called the Red Kraken.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sick nickname.
Yeah. So I hope we get to see more about him, and I wish I could tell you his whole story,
Dalton.
but I'm not going to do that.
Keep an eye out for Dalton, season 3 watchers.
Dalton Greyjoy. So then the Dance of the Dragon ends. The Ironborn fall back into step with Targaryen rule. And I'm not going to tell you which Targaryen, just one of them. And they kind of have a lull in some drama until the events of present-day Game of Thrones. So the books kind of explain all of that, and I try to stay away from present day as much as I can, just because I know you probably read it. But I will tell you that it's my personal belief that we do need to pay more attention to the relationship between all of the currently living Greyjoys. So,
interesting.
We've got Theon and Asha. They're the children of Balon Greyjoy, and they each have some pretty significant POV chapters. But then they have 3 living uncles, and I think we need to not forget about these 3 uncles. There is Euron, Victarion, and Aeron. Euron is the one that has sailed more places than pretty much anyone alive. He has this horn that is probably the Horn of Winter.
Pretty significant horn.
Yes. Victarion is also a really good ship captain in his own right, and he's really good in battle. And then Aeron is a priest of the drowned god, and his priest's name is Aeron Damp Hair.
So we have the Red Kraken, and then we have Damp Hair.
Damp Hair.
I know which one I'd rather have, but that's just me.
Well, he's a priest, so he doesn't bathe, and he's illiterate.
That's tough.
So, but I do think those 3 specifically are going to be kind of a big deal if they're able to seize power, and they are trying to actively. Like they had the King's Moat, Euron won. So yeah,
they will be influential in the story.
Yeah. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed your tour of the Iron Islands. If you're feeling a little seasick, remember that it's best to sit towards the stern rather than the bow.
Good tip. Wow, I didn't know they had that much history. Because again, I am more the casual fan here, where I have just really watched the show. I haven't read the books at all, and they're just lightly glossed over in the show. I feel like yes, I think later in the seasons we do spend more time there, but their history as a casual fan really went over my head because I feel like I was not as locked in on them.
Like why they're so committed to this. Yeah. I do think they kind of gloss over that too. It's
so if they're really going to be that influential, especially for this last book, I would like to revisit their culture. And this was a nice little preemptive dose.
Dipping our toe in the sea.
Dipping our toe in the drowned god. I just don't want to be drowned.
No, what is dead may never die.
Nah, I'm good. I would rather just what is living should still live is my motto. So,
Yes.
yeah, I think that's it for our first episode back.
All right.
We're so back.
We are so back.
It's like riding a bike.
It is.
All right. Well, fellow adventurers, that is a wrap for today's adventure into the realms of Westeros and Middle-earth. We hope you've enjoyed journeying through the histories, mysteries, and fascinating lore of these worlds.
We will return with insights, laughs, and maybe even some unexpected dragons of wisdom along the way. Next up in our Middle-earth adventure, we will be taking a Westerosi type episode and explore the map of Beleriand. And then on our tour of Westeros, we will make a pit stop in the Stormlands and learn all about House Baratheon.
And we encourage you guys to join our conversations online on our Instagram at fortheloveof.lore. Share your theories, tell us your grievances, or just chat about how you discovered these epic sagas yourself.
Like, what's your favorite character arc in Game of Thrones, or your favorite battle scene in The Lord of the Rings? We want to hear from you.
So thank you for tuning in, and remember, the best adventures are the ones we take together. We swear it by the old gods and the new. Peace! Nailed it.